Jim realized that Jan is a historian. She is a storyteller. She is a witness to storytelling in Sevier County. And she's also one who shares these stories and this history. So he wanted her to be here, so I reached out to her, and here she is today.
And she's also the best funeral programmer.
In case you're waiting to die or something, see Jan.
It always should be a celebration of life, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Remember those who have gone before us, and listen to their stories before they go.
There you go. Jan and I are going to have a little conversation about the history of storytelling here in Sevier County and about her part in it. And she's going to talk about not only the professional storytelling, but the grassroots storytelling. Yeah. Now, Jan is a storyteller, as I said. She's a published writer. She's a historian. She's half of the team of Cousin Jan, who are a storytelling duo. She is a founding member of the Smoky Mountain Storytellers Association, and she's a friend of mine since the days when we did Smoky Mountain Jacktail Storytelling Theater. So on this cold day, let's give a warm welcome to Janice, and she's one of those hyphenated words, Janice Brooks-Headrick. Let's welcome her. You know what? Well, now, Jan, you ain't from around these parts, are you?
Now,
No.
what makes you say that?
Well, because I talked to you the other night and found out. But anyway, she comes from way upstate in New York. What town in that area?
It's Binghamton. It's a little town outside of Binghamton. You from up there? Nope? Okay. So anyway, upstate is different than New York City. It's rural. We have farms, we have cows, we had chickens, and
Do you have homes?
we actually have phones now. But I'll tell you, I was 16 before the little town I lived in got a dial phone. We had those crank ones, and we had a little lady that was running the whole place, and she's like 76 years old, and if the lines went down, Rita went and put them back up. She could do it.
Well,
She
Jan,
could do it.
as a part of your heritage up there, your family participated in storytelling and story sharing, did they not?
Well, it wasn't so much a frame thing. It was like,
Passion.
when you get together with your neighbors or your aunts or your uncles, if you sit in the corner and you listen real close, you'll find out stuff you didn't know you could have been told. And now, no, I won't tell you about that uncle.
So you've got some roots in storytelling from your home state, and also you had a great-great-grandfather who wrote for a local newspaper, so you have some writing in your background.
Yeah.
But you left all of that. You pulled up roots from up there, and you moved down to the Smoky Mountains of Sevier County.
Mm-hmm.
Now, many people, when they come here, they come because of the beautiful, wonderful Smoky Mountains and that rich heritage that's there, the culture, the new culture that they find. They come to explore different peoples and all. Is that why you came to Sevier County?
My husband was offered a job with TVA.
Oh.
You know, you follow the money.
Follow the money.
I'm very involved with a strange and unusual history here, and how, I mean, John Sevier is, well, I'm turned around a little bit. John Sevier's place is right out there, and the things he did, and his wife, and they've got their graves up there at the courthouse in Knoxville, and the story about that girl wanted to get married, and she knew this fella who was a wonderful person, and he was so brave, and he was fighting the Indians and all of that. Well, she was at this fort, and the Indians were coming, and John Sevier was on the inside, and she was on the outside because her daddy told her to take the cows out, and she was out there, and then all of a sudden there's Indians there. They wanted their property back. Well, she ran around that fort, and she ran around that fort, and then she decided the only way is up and over. She ran up the side of the building and landed right in John Sevier's arms. Well, he had to marry her. And they had another 8 kids or so. Yeah, and it's the truth.
So Sevier County is rich with storytelling heritage.
Oh, yeah.
So you uprooted from New York and you came down here.
Mhm.
And you and your husband moved around for a while. I think you said 10 different states in 6 years or 5 years, something like that?
Yeah, he was a consulting engineer with a degree in electrical and mechanical. And so if they said, we want you, he was off and gone. And I lived like a gypsy for 10 years.
But eventually you said no more of this traveling. You
I'm
wanted to
not-
settle down, so you settled down in Sevier County. And the two of you at some point started a little restaurant there.
Now that was in South Knox. That was in South Knoxville.
That's Knoxville. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then in that little restaurant, after a while, you said to your husband, hit the road, Jack. And
Basically, I
separate.
told him, why don't you go up and work for IBM for a while, and maybe we could pay some of these bills.
Okay, I see.
I had to get him out of there.
So with him gone, that left you with the restaurant to run by yourself.
And I don't do biscuits.
And it was hard to find labor, and the business wasn't that good, but you had a qualification for somebody that you would hire to work there. What was that qualification?
They had to make biscuits. I can't
You
make
have to make
To save
biscuits.
my life. And what?
Biscuits.
Biscuits.
Now, there was this one little girl that applied, and she was 23, and I said, well, do you have a resume? She didn't quite know what I mean. I said, do you have a list of things that you can do? And she goes, well, I'm out of Cotton County, and my daddy's the sheriff there. And I learned to make biscuits when I was a kid. Now, mind you, he's also the biggest moonshiner. That's the girl I needed. She could tell me what's going on around here because there was certain words in the vocabulary that I didn't quite know what they were. It was hard.
Well, now across the street from this restaurant, there was a man who worked in moving heavy equipment, right?
Mhm.
And he would come to your restaurant and come every morning
At 6:15 every morning.
and order breakfast. He would order biscuits and gravy, right?
Yep.
And one day he had the nerve to say something about your biscuits. What was that?
Well, the biscuits were in the restaurant. I wouldn't
Not your
claim
biscuits,
them.
but the restaurant's biscuits.
I wouldn't claim them.
But what did he say about your restaurant's biscuits?
He said he could do better than that.
He did.
And I said, show me.
Show me.
And he said, I'll come in Saturday. He said, you know, I went to the culinary school. I have a degree. I can make biscuits. But instead he was moving big machines. And he came in and he made biscuits. And they were very good. And years later, I found out, yeah, he did go to that school and his life was interesting. The fun part was when they were having this big old family reunion, and they always asked, his mama said, Charles, will you fix some biscuits for us? And he did. So I got really good biscuits, and now I gotta eat them frozen out of the refrigerator.
Well, now this man, what was his name? And what
Charles
happened
Everett.
in your relationship?
Well, you know, a man that can fix biscuits.
He's a keeper.
Big blue eyes, and he walks like Fred Astaire, you know, that snaky man. Yeah. You gotta kind of take notice of him,
Uh-huh.
you know?
And you did.
Oh, yeah. And here's the interesting part. That girl, I think her name was Marlene, I had the restaurant in front, and I had this little apartment with a little bathroom in the back. And she said, you know, you've been getting up at 5:30 every day for months. Why don't you just take a day off? I can do that. So I was laying in my bed. I turned the TV on. I was hoping for Oprah Winfrey. But that's when she decided she was going to argue about books, and I didn't want to hear that. And I had my dogs. There was one on this side and one on the other. They were about 35 pounds with big barks. And they started making these growling noises. And I looked up, and on the inside of my door, there was this guy who's standing there. And it was the Charles. And it was odd because he was wearing the ugliest hat I had ever seen. It was probably looked like roadkill. It was red and green plaid, and it looked like that cartoon guy that was always shooting the rabbit.
Elmer
You know?
Fudd.
Thank you. I have a problem with losing names. And he was standing there, and he kind of leaned back and said, I won't be coming in today. And I said, what happened? And he said, I just hurt myself. And this is like 6:15 in the morning. And then he just walked across the room, and he knelt down on the end of the bed and crawled up, and he kissed me right there and disappeared. I thought it was time for me to get up and get out with other people. I wasn't doing too good, you know. I get a day off, and what do I do? I hallucinate. So I got up, I got dressed, I got out in the front and was serving out the biscuits and gravy and everything, and Charles' co-workers were coming in, and they were, where's Cuz? Where's Cuz? That's what they called him. And I said, I don't know. Well, I wasn't going to tell them that I just saw his ghost. He told me he wasn't coming in. You don't tell people stuff like that because they'll think you're crazy. I have been certified. And finally, his boss came in and he says, well, dang, we're going to have a rough day today because Cuz hurt himself and he won't be coming in. I knew that. I knew that. But you know, there's something about a man who can kiss you right there on the cheek. And if you've been kissed by an angel, you better follow up on that. And we've been married like 37 years. He passed away. But that's how we first got together.
Wow, what a story. And
You didn't know
so
that?
I did not know that part of the story. I'm glad to hear it.
It's true.
So you connected with this guy, and he was a man that comes from a family that I think we should talk about some. Because the family of Brooks-Headrick, dating back to, was it William Headrick?
William Headrick, yeah.
From the Germany and Scotland era, and coming to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And then he was in the American Revolution. And Then they came down when Tennessee was actually North Carolina. And they come down here, and he's buried out here in Headrick's Chapel. Well, there's a lot of Headricks. A lot of them.
There were a lot of them in his family.
Well, he was the seventh child
How
of
many?
15.
15 children.
His mother had 15 children, one at a time. And she raised them. And her husband passed away when he was in his early 50s and left her to raise those kids.
This is his mother, Lois, on the screen back there in the
And there's her
headstone.
brothers and sisters.
And there's some of her brothers and sisters when she was using a walker later on in her life. But she was the woman who took care of that huge family, held it together at very hard times,
And whipped them.
and whooped them now and then too.
You need whipping. And she did that for 3 generations.
Well, one of the things that's fascinating about his family is that they were involved in the storytelling tradition and also in a folk musical tradition also,
Yeah.
because she had at least, 3 or 4 sons who played music? 5, all 5. Yeah. And so they would have musical gigs here and there, and Cuz was a part of that. You said that he started performing when he was about what?
16.
About
17.
16 years old. We saw a picture of him earlier when he was 16. And when the group took a break from playing music, Cuz started doing something.
Well, he started filling in to keep people's attention because some of the places he played was a little rough. The old time rock and roll and the old country stuff, it could be rough. Yeah, that's out of Cates Cove. And so he told stories. But his brothers, his oldest brother, Ray, played music at the Bijou when he was like 13. And he went on to play with other musicians, and Jim did, and David, Ed. I'm missing one here.
Right?
It took me 10 years to learn who's who, because some of them looked a lot like each other, you know. So I get them confused.
Now the mother, Lois, was also a storyteller, was she not?
Oh, yeah.
And she had heard stories from her parents, and they had heard stories from their parents, so that storytelling tradition was a part of the Headrick family.
Yeah, she told me stories. Well, see, I wanted to learn more about the culture and how am I doing this right, because I'm that dumb Yankee girl that can't hardly talk right. And she was trying to help me learn to get along with everybody. So every Thursday I'd go to her house and we would talk, and she'd let me record her. And yeah, it was fun. And she told me the ghost stories, because I love ghost stories. And she told me stories that her grandmother had told her, and her grandmother had lived during the Civil War. And then when she told Mama the same stories about things that had happened to her, that Mama told them. And that was like 4 generations, this whole long 100-year reign of people telling me stories. So it was very interesting.
And Cuz said to me only in the last few years before he passed away that his granddaddy had told him jack tales on his granddaddy's knee is what he told me, and I was quite surprised at that. So that story tradition was very strong, and Cuz picked it up during musical performances, and then he started to hone it more and more and do not only the music but also the storytelling. And so he appeared at many different places. And then you joined him at some point and decided, well, first of all, you liked his stories, so you wanted to write them down. But something happened. You took a turn in the road from that because of Faye Burke. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
I was trying to learn how to write the stories that Charles told, Cuz told, as they were phonetically. Did you ever try to write in phonetic? You can't do it. Writing and telling the story is two entirely different things. And I was taking these lessons from Faye, and she said, why don't you just go up to Jonesboro and tell stories? I said, Jonesboro? Oh, so we went up to Jonesboro, we heard the stories, we were blown away.
So what is Jonesboro, in case they don't know?
It's the oldest town in Tennessee. It's about 100 miles north of here.
And what was this festival?
Oh, it was called the Storytelling Festival, and they've been holding it for 30 years now.
They started in about 1973, according to my research. And it's a big event where storytellers come in, professional storytellers, and crowds come in. It's hard to get a place to stay when you go there.
Yeah, you know, if you've got 7,000 people in a tent, and they're all listening to one person, and this one person has got the audience enthralled, and there's all these people that are thinking and breathing and experiencing this all together. It's a feeling you can't have any other way except in church. You know, but it's like everybody had the same thoughts. There was the same dynamic. It was just awesome.
Yes, and Jonesboro became the start of a national new interest in the art of
Yeah.
storytelling and collecting storytellers and telling and perpetuating them for
You
other
know,
generations.
Well, there's storytellers everywhere. And I suspect there's more than one in this room.
There just might be. Who could it be?
Yes. And it's like, it's what people do, you know, to pass on. I mean, we wouldn't have a Bible if people didn't tell stories. Then what would we do?
So what did you and Cuz do at Jonesboro?
Well, the first year we just went and enjoyed it and sucked it up, and then we joined the local there, and that was fun. And there was a lot of people in Sevier County and in the Smokies that were developing their own way of doing it. And Mary Peterson, she got together with one of the rangers, and she was telling stories out in Cades Cove. And she did that for maybe 10 years. And then she had one, unfortunately.
She was also working with, what was her name? Elsie Burrow.
Yeah, who was like a nationally known teacher. Little tiny lady, weighed about 93 pounds. And she got this award that she was a best teacher. And the thing was about this big, and it looked like she was wearing a dinner plate. But she could tell the stories, and she could hold the audience, and she was in her late 80s, I think even then.
There's some video of her at the little Greenbrier school, ringing the school bell from way back when.
Yeah.
But Elsie and Mary Peterson were telling stories at, I guess, the cable cabin
Yeah.
in Cades Cove. And then something happened to Mary one time. That's how you
Well,
got involved.
yeah. Well, we had been going there because there was all this opportunity to go and listen to stories. And they were having an occasional where they would have a bunch of storytellers come in. We got to meet a lot of them. And there were preachers and teachers and clowns. And we enjoyed it. But then it got to a point where Mary had had a brain aneurysm. And being the tough woman she was, she lived in Louisville. And she said, I've got something going on. I better go to the hospital. And she drove herself to the hospital. And they found out what was wrong with her, and they fixed it, and she worked for another 5 or 10 years after that. And she said, you know, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of losing my stories. And she could tell, oh, law, she was pulling them out of the last century. That it was awesome.
But she couldn't tell on a particular storytelling time, so she invited you.
Yeah, well,
and others,
there's a bunch of us
Buzz,
that.
Charles Maynard,
Yes, Charles Maynard, and.
to come substitute
Yeah,
for her.
we'd fill in for her because she was afraid that if nobody was telling there, the whole thing would die and it would not happen anymore. And,
Well, this
but
group.
Jean Renfro,
Jean Renfro.
yeah,
Well, this group of storytellers liked the idea of storytelling together
yeah,
and saw, I guess, a vacuum, that there was no official group of storytellers. So you and some others started the Smoky Mountain Storytellers Association. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that?
There were times when we were asked to tell stories at an event and we were already booked somewhere else, but we knew a lot of different storytellers. So we would say, well, we can't do this, but maybe David can, maybe Luke can. And, you know, we just spread the word like that. So we found we had a group of 20 or 25 people that were capable of doing stuff. Plus, if you're living in Knoxville and you get asked to tell a story, it's not so bad. You go down there, you do it. We did Marble Springs for years. And, but if you're in Gatlinburg, say at the far end of the Smokies, that you want somebody who can fill in for you that lives close by. So it was just kind of getting a network pulled together, and it was a good thing. Met a lot of wonderful people, wonderful people.
What are some of the events and all that the Smoky Mountain Storytellers Association have been a part of?
Okay, we finally got organized through the state as a nonprofit corporation in '90, and we have told stories. Well, we go to the national, but not as a group, but as each single person. But then there have been festivals here in Pigeon Forge. They held that festival for 19 years, every summer. And we have had festivals in Gatlinburg, and several different ones of us have told stories everywhere else. Charles and I told stories from New York to Alabama, so I could translate. That was fun, you know. So we've told stories a whole lot of the time. Well, as singles, we had told at the Blackberry Farm for 10 years. We were there right in.
Yeah, Blackberry Farm, that's in Lamar, Alexander country, right?
It's in his front yard.
In his front yard. One of the most creative programs I ever saw you do was done there. Some people coming in were asking for a special kind of storytelling situation. So Jan concocted a program based on an old folk tale, Knoxville Girl. And there was a pond there at the Blackberry Farms, and there was a wagon, and they put the, quote, audience in the wagon, and then they would drive around the pond to different spots, and when they stopped at a different spot, there would be somebody who told a part of the story, and it would go on and on around. And in the woods, she had people making noises out there and fog machines. So it's probably the most creative work I've ever seen you do.
You played a cop, didn't you?
I played a cop.
Yeah. Scary.
And then you also did Marble Springs, as you told,
Yeah.
as you said, the group did, and John Severe's home, stomping grounds. So many different places.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Well, one of the places that you told at some point was around 1988. I met you and Cuz in 1987. We had done a community theater play, and afterwards some of the cast members wanted to continue on that company. So we had a program at the Episcopal Church in Gatlinburg. It's called SCTG, Sevier County Theater Guild. And at that, you showed up with Cuz and a few others, because we had invited anybody who wanted to come and bring their own stories or whatever. She had written a play about the men sitting around at the courthouse, right up front, and swapping stories and telling lies and all that kind of stuff. And so they presented that program, and Cuz was a standout. I mean, he was just such a natural. He was terrific. The whole story was so much fun. So I remembered them in 1987 when I started something called the Smoky Mountain Jacktail Storytelling Theater outside Gatlinburg at a campground. And so in '88, I called them up and I said, would you like to come and help get this Smoky Mountain Jacktail started? And so they came, and at first we were just right on the ground floor, and then later on we had a little stage, and in '88 we had built a cabin, and we told stories there. These are some of the black and whites from those days. You can see Cuz and Jan on the right-hand side. That's Cuz on the left, and that's Jan standing on the porch there. And so they worked with me for 2 years, developing the Smoky Mountain Jacktails. At first we had very little in the way of props and all, but we would use like a picnic table to become the Giant's table, because they were the first giant and his Giant's wife. And one of the funniest things that I remember was, just a simple thing. We didn't have any props, so I just blew up some balloons for the Giants to be eating. And one of them was a little reddish balloon about that large. And so Jan just improvised, well, here's your Oscar Mayer wiener. And I just thought that was so clever.
I don't remember that, but I remember that Cuz was the Giant's wife in one of those. And you had like this knit dress that you just pull over him. Somehow he was wearing a band that was like a blow-up thingy, and anyway, and then they put 2 great big balloons on top of it.
Sounds like something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
And then Cuz was rolling around, and his bosoms were going this way and that way, and the men in the audience, they had some chairs they put up now. They were falling off, and Charles was grinning like a possum.
Of course. Well, one of the things that we really liked to do was one called Big Jack and Little Jack. The color scenes are from Big Jack and Little Jack. But we had lots of fun during those days, and then in 1990 we took one of our stories to Dollywood and did a Christmas version of one of the stories that we had done out there. So, lots of fun those days, and that's how I got to know them. I invited them back for special anniversaries like the 10th and the 25th anniversary of the Jacktail. So we've known each other all these many years.
Yeah, when we were younger.
When we were younger, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the last time I remember seeing Cuz, he was in the hospital, and he was having some health issues. But you know what? He was still telling stories. Still telling stories in his hospital.
That's what he was made to do.
Evidently.
You know, it's being able to do a good story is a gift.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard, but you gotta remember beginning, middle, end. And there's people who don't know when to end. And there's people that don't know how to find a start. So anybody can tell stories, really.
And I'd say that's one of the things that we would both like to emphasize, not only telling stories, but collecting family stories. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, can I talk about that?
Or a lot.
Okay, this guy's name is James Hogg. He is my 7th great uncle. And he started telling stories and writing them down in about 1800. And they're still publishing them. So he has lots of stories. And Sharon McCrum. Sharon is a local storyteller, and she writes great books. This one specifically is about her family. When they were in Scotland, one guy was kidnapped, and he came to America, and he told his story. Now, it keeps going, and it keeps going, and you find out that this family, the McQuarrie brothers, they're doing pretty good. And the song is still with them because they kept it alive. But this is a great one. There's another book, a movie called Songcatcher. There's a singer who has been singing the old ballads and stuff all of her life, and they made a movie out of her life and her songs and all of that, and it's called Songcatcher. It's not the same as this one, but dang, the two of them together will give you a new heart, and you'll remember your mom's stories, you'll remember your grandmother's stories, and for God's sakes, write them down, save them, do something, at least give them to the kids, whether they like it or not.
Also, Janice, speaking of this storytelling, collecting them and also keeping them accurate is probably one of the things. And you have a story about one of your, not ancestors, but your neighbor's ancestors, Sir Walter Scott in Scotland. And someone collected one of his stories from this person's grandmother, I think it is. And the grandmother was not happy about it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My great-great-great grandmother, and her name was Maggie. Maggie loved to tell stories, and she was privileged. Her family had kept all of these old chants and the old sagas that came down from beyond the time. And she married this fella whose family kept all the old songs. Well, their son was a shepherd, and he met this other guy. This other guy's name was Walter Scott. And Walter Scott was interested. He saved a lot of the old stories and ballads. And he wanted to keep one of Maggie's. So he went over, and she told him the story, and he wrote it down, and he put it in one of his book collections. And she jumped on him because he did not write it down right. He didn't spell it right, didn't get it in the right order, and she knew that it had to be perfect because it was not meant to change. Some of these old stories have come down the same way for generation after generation, and some get changed, and that's a loss. But keep the original.
Can you think of any ways to suggest to the people here today how to go about this this task, I'll call it? It's not a task, the labor of love of gathering family stories and all and preserving them. Do you have any suggestions to how they can go about that?
Go ask your granny. The oldest person in your family that has any kind of memory left, and get it down. You can tape record it. You can just use your little phone, you know, those fancy phones, to record it. Because in 50 years, who knows what's going to happen? And one of the problems with trying to save it in, 1980, I saved stories from my mom. It's on a cassette tape. guess what? They don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
The only thing that'll work is if you can somehow write it down. So,
And save it digitally would be the best advice for the
On
new age
paper.
materials.
on paper.
Oh, well, I think paper's absolutely a great way to do it. No doubt. Another way I would suggest is if your family has a family photo album, is to sit down with the person and look at the photos and ask them their responses, their remembrances in relationship to those photos.
And write it on the back.
And write it on the back.
Yeah.
Our Lucinda Ogle, she always wrote them on the front of her photos. But yes, that's another way to stimulate the thoughts and the imagination of the people. And you mentioned old people, but Jan, you and I we're not ancient, but we've got history to preserve also. And so that would include many of the people sitting right here. Your history is also important to preserve.
What adventure did you have in high school? Oh, you're not talking, are you? Yeah. But we're from a generation that made the world change, you know? And there's whole younger people, it's sort of like, it's gonna sell, what'll we do? Our TV won't work. What can we possibly do? Teach them. Teach them. And last night on Blackish, it's a TV show, the grandfather was telling this story to his grandkids about what happened when he and his wife were younger. Totally wrong. And it was so entertaining and it was so funny. But the last line was in the whole show, just tell them. Just tell them. You know, there's people that I've met that had no idea what they did with their lives. And they would come up and tell me stories that were so fantastic. Astronauts, mechanics, people who blew up wells, you know? So it's fun, and it's worth doing.
And I will say this, if there are any of you who have any people in your family who are getting to that age and you want to preserve them, call me. When I moved to the Smokies in 1976, I wanted to start preserving some of the history here. And the very first thing I did was to record John Lane at 100 years old in the nursing home. And I have a video camera, and if I can work it out with the time, I'll be glad to help you out. So, give me a holler.
It'd be fun.
Yeah. Oh yes, we'll have fun.
Yeah.
Now, Jan, do you have any little special stories or anecdotes, if we have time, that you would like to tell? Your stories or cousins or anything?
You want me to tell your story?
No, I want to, well, yes, sort of, kind of. There's two questions I have, and before this started, we were talking about your book that's not available anymore. So I'd like for you to tell us about that book. And what was it, Biscuits and Bagels, right? Or from
Bagels to Biscuits.
Okay, so there's that.
Me and another girl who lived in Seymour, I can't remember her name now. Oh, by the way, when you get old enough, sometimes you'll forget names and such. They can have medicine for that now. But we had a writers group here in Sevier County, and she wanted to write the stories about her things that happened to her because she moved down here and she's from like Michigan or Minnesota or someplace. And so we wanted to write stories about things that happened to us. And it was accepted as a book. It's a tiny little book, but it was something I could do, you know? And there's a lot of people that would like to have printed stories. Mary Stone. Anybody here know Mary Stone? Anyway, Yeah, she did a lot of writing. She had it was a veteran something, and I wrote for her stories of things that happened to me that I thought were really wild and unusual, and the local people just had, it's how we've always done it, you know? And it's like, wow, that's really special. No, my granddad's been doing this for 100 years. I was just bum-puzzled, wonderful.
Janice, we're going to have to close it out, I'm afraid. Two of the statements that I associate with you are that we are hardwired for stories.
Well, yeah.
And the other is your stories are who you are. They're your history, where you came from, what changed your life, and what you aspire to become. You want to add anything to that?
And it's a lot of fun.
And
It's a lot of fun. You know, I'm living alone. I get to watch TV a lot, and I would rather talk to real people. But if you've got a community of people that you can visit with every now and then, it's a good thing. And you can find out things that have happened to you and to your grandchildren. Talking is important. It's really important.
Thank you, Jan, for being here today. So let's give her a round of applause.